Wow, so it's time for a next speaker. It's a great pleasure for me because I particularly like this one especially. Rohit Bhargava is a leading authority on marketing, trends and innovation. Rohit is the founder of Non-Obvious Company and previously spent over 15 years advising large organizations on digital and marketing. He is the #1 Wall Street Journal best-selling author of 6 books on topics as wide-ranging as the future of virtual work, very apropos today, building a human brand with personality, and why leaders always eat left-handed. Do I have to ask about it because I'm right-handed, for example. But Rohit also teaches a popular course on marketing and storytelling at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and writes a monthly column on trends for GQ magazine in Brazil. And I'm so happy to finally have Rohit speaking at Masters and Robots, because I've seen him last year on South by Southwest, the biggest global gathering of tech people in Austin, Texas. And he was like more than 2,000 people gathered to listen to his annual speech about non-obvious trends. So we will be able to there was no South by Southwest this year, but we have Masters and Robots and we have Rohit with us. Hello, Rohit. Welcome. And the virtual stage is yours.
Hi, my name is Rohit Bhargava, and I'd like to talk to you about the future. Well, specifically predicting the future, which seems like an impossible task. And I know that we only have a short time together, so telling you that I can teach you how to predict the future probably seems totally impossible. But what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of a process on how I think about this topic. And a lot of times when we think about and when we hear about the future, what we typically hear is predictions. And the first thing I'd like to share with you is a bit of a confession. And my confession is that I'm not a futurist. That is an unusual place to start, because most of the people who talk about the future and think about the future and teach this, they're futurists. And the reason why I don't describe myself as a futurist is because I pay attention to the present. In fact, I've specialized in the present. And what I mean by that is I've spent a lot of time looking at the patterns and stories and things that are happening right now and tried to put the pieces together to anticipate what's going to happen next. And in the process of doing that, I've uncovered a method that I want to teach to you during our time here about how to do that for yourself. I call it the 5 habits, the 5 mindsets of being what I call a trend curator. And I think that anyone can learn how to do it. And what I want to do with this talk is teach you how to do that. And so what you see here is me observing the accelerating present, but also a bunch of images of me at various events. I've done a lot of live events. I do live events all the time. And now many of them are virtual. And so instead of joining you in Poland for the Masters and Robots conference, I'm doing it virtually, which is sad for me and sad for us in a little many ways, because we don't get to bond together and we don't get to be together. But we do have the benefit of using this virtual studio. And so here I am in my home office, and that's what you're looking at here. And this is where I do a lot of the trend research. And so what I'm going to talk to you about is what some of the books bring in. I'm going to share some of the tips and tools that I use and really give you a behind the scenes look at what it means for me to start thinking about and predicting the future. So the first thing that I think we need to do is just look at the background of the whole series. So for me, every year there's been a new version of this book that I call Non-Obvious. And every edition of the book has trends, and the trends predict what's going to happen, what's going to matter for the future. Now, one of the things that's happened since the book came out, since the most recent edition of the book came out in January, is the world has totally shifted. We're in this time of extreme disruption, and we see many signs of this disruption. I mean, we see places that used to be full have now gone empty. We see interesting uses of technology. I mean, here's an example in this image you see here of a robot dog that's being used in Singapore to make sure that people remain socially distant from one another. Face shields are being reinvented into fashion statements. You see even there's some masks that have automated translation built into them. So now we can communicate with one another through the mask, which is a very interesting evolution of this. There's virtual clothing. Gucci just launched a virtual clothing line to help you look better in these virtual meetings and virtual sessions that we're all forced to do. And in Argentina, there's socially distanced soccer because we need to get back to our sports, and we want to do it in a way that is responsible. And what all of these things really point to is that we're in a world that is constantly shifting because we have many, many big questions. And there's a few of those major questions that I encounter all the time in the work that I do and in the conversations that I have. One of them is this idea of like, what is essential? And related to that is who is essential? Am I essential in the work that I do? And of course, we all want to be able to answer yes to this question. But the bigger question that it leads us to is when will all of these things return to normal? And a shifted version of that question that I've been thinking about a lot and that I've been talking to many, many leaders at large organizations around the world about is who's going to win in what we might call the future normal. Not the new normal, but the future of whatever is the process of how we work, how we live, what we buy. Who's going to win? What are the patterns that emerge in who's already managing to use a Silicon Valley term, to pivot their business, to be successful right now, and who's going to continue to be successful. And one of the big insights that really has driven a lot of my work is this amazing quote from Isaac Asimov, a famous science fiction writer, who once said in an interview, "I'm not a speed reader, I'm a speed understander." And I love this because what it points to is this one fundamental insight behind what makes someone or a business successful and makes another one fail. And if I could put it into a single term, if I could describe for you what the secret is to being successful, it would be this: that the people who understand people always win. And there's such a deep insight here because what it comes down to is understanding why people act the way they act, why they behave the way they behave, why they believe the things that they believe. And that's really at the heart of this whole process that I've developed for being what I call a non-obvious thinker. And eventually, when I started doing the research and talking to people and doing many of these trainings and workshops and things with people everywhere in the world, I uncovered that there were really 5 key habits that bring anyone to this point of being what I call a non-obvious thinker. And these 5 habits are: number 1, to be observant, to see what others miss, to pay attention to details. Number 2, to be curious, to always ask why, to try and uncover the reasons why things happen the way they do. Number 3 is to be thoughtful, take time to think. Number 4 is be elegant, craft beautiful ideas, use specific language when you talk about those ideas. And the 5th one is to be fickle, to learn to move on, to not stick with a single idea, to move on to the next version of that, and to really constantly be evolving your thinking. And so one of the big things that I discovered in the process of this is that some people feel like, well, it's a skill. It's a natural skill. I'm either born with it or I'm not. I can either see around the corner and do all of these things, or I can't. And if you're familiar with this video, I took a screen grab of it, but what you'll see at the bottom here is a link to be able to watch this video in full. And by the way, if you go to this link, not only can you watch this video, but you can also get a copy of all of my slides. So if you want a copy of all the slides and also a few other bonus gifts there, that's the link to use. But if you watch this video and you know what's going to happen, you should still watch it anyway, because there's a twist, and I'm not going to reveal the twist to you. But in this video, essentially you see people passing a ball, and the challenge is to see how many times they pass the ball, and there's a gorilla that goes through the middle. And what behavioral science has found is if you are super, super focused on counting the number of times that the ball is passed, you won't notice the gorilla. Many people won't. And when you first see it and you don't notice the gorilla, and then you watch it again and you do see the gorilla, it's a big aha moment. Now, this has been around for decades, so it's possible you have seen this already. The reason why I'm using the analogy is to indicate to you that there are not some people in the world who are better at noticing a gorilla than others. It's not a skill that you're either born with or not. Once you know what you're supposed to be looking for. And once you know that you need to be paying attention, you always see the gorilla. Everyone does. And I think that learning about trends and thinking about trends and anticipating what they mean is sort of the same thing. If you can train yourself to pay attention to those details and notice those things that other people don't notice, you will be able to see them in a way that other people don't. And so when it comes to doing that, there's a couple of things that I recommend. And one is to pay attention to unusual details. So these are just a few of the books that are on my shelf right now that are totally random. They're not really useful. In fact, one of the books, the one at the bottom here, is the Book of Useless Knowledge. Yes, useless knowledge, because sometimes we need to encounter useless knowledge in order to be able to make those patterns fit together. And that is a really interesting way of trying to bring in other ways to see the world. So read interesting magazines, read different magazines, many of which are not necessarily targeted at you. I read all sorts of different magazines to try and bring in these insights because I find them hugely valuable. And then you start to put the pieces together. And what I'd like to do is give you a very quick overview of what this process looks like for me. So what you're watching here is a time-lapse video of my trend curation process. And essentially what you're seeing is many different articles that I've taken and torn out of magazines and different places, and I'm bringing them together based on themes. So all of these articles relate to the same theme. Then what you're seeing is a process of sorting and arranging these so that they come to a single topic. And in this case, the trend is a topic that I named truthing. And truthing was the idea that we seek the truth for ourselves when we don't know who to trust. Then it eventually turns into an outline, and the outline turns into a chapter. And what you see here is that process laid out in a very physical sense, which is what I use every year when I'm putting together the book, the Non-Obvious Insights book. So this is really what it actually looks like. But what I also wanted to do is give you a very quick definition of what a trend is. So to me, a trend, a non-obvious trend, the way I describe it is that it's a curated observation of the accelerating present. That's my definition for a trend. And this is a very specific definition because it focuses on what I call the accelerating present. That's such a big key part of how I talk about this. But one of the things we did at one point is we actually took a extended photo shoot where we went and tried to visualize what this actually looks like. And so what I thought is that I would show you what that photo shoot looked like and what we eventually came up with, which is kind of unique, and it took quite a while to put together. So this is me covered head to toe in Post-it notes. And it's a fun way to bring this idea to life of how we need to curate ideas by sorting through noise. So the Post-it notes represent the noise, and what this photo shoot is meant to do is bring that noise out and say we need to be able to pay attention to the details instead of just getting stuck on all of that noise. So now that we've talked a little bit about the process behind this, I want to dig into some of the specific megatrends, so some of the actual megatrends from the book. And I chose 4 in particular that I think would be very interesting to discuss based on the theme of the conference and based on just where we are in the world right now. And the first one is something that I call the human mode. And the human mode is the idea that when we have more and more technology around us that isolates us from one another, we seek out and place greater value on those more human interactions, those more human connections. And that's such a big thing that makes a huge difference for us because we want those human connections, which is why we can experience so many different musicians who are creating lots and lots of material. So here's a musical group called Now United that has artists from many different countries all gathered together, and they started it through a reality show, and now they're just a really popular group, and they create videos and dance parties for their fans and post them online so that people can experience them. Brand new, big news this week. Amitabh Bachchan, legendary Bollywood star, is now going to be the voice of Amazon Alexa in India. Highly recognizable voice. And again, creating this little bit more human touch to technology that we all encounter and see all the time. Another more human way of just dealing with this pandemic was a brilliant campaign from the tourism board in Iceland that suggested we all need to just scream And so maybe the ideal tourism campaign would be to encourage people to let it out, to scream. And you can send your scream to Iceland, and they will actually put it out into the wilderness through a series of speakers. And so it's just a great campaign meant to try and bring that to life. And another innovation that I just saw, which was kind of fun, is this animation add-on to virtual meetings where you can literally kind of put your thumb up or create a gesture, or if you kind of disappear from the screen, then messages will pop up based on what you gesture. And it's another way of trying to get past the technology barrier that keeps us from being human with one another. And ultimately, the lesson behind this, the big learning, and for every one of these trends, I have what I call a stealable idea. And the stealable idea here is focus on having a personality. How do we use a personality to bring out what is most interesting about what we do, and to make more of a human connection with the people that we're trying to reach is a really, really important question. The next trend is something I called instant knowledge. And instant knowledge is based on our growing need to be able to understand and learn anything more quickly. And sometimes what it means is that we leave the importance of being a master, of getting wisdom behind for the quick lesson. And this trend really came to my attention in part because of one very disturbing story that I saw. And I say disturbing because as a father of two boys, this story really got me worried, because it was about an 8-year-old who decided that he was hungry later on in the evening and took his parents' car and drove to McDonald's to get a meal from the drive-thru. And when he arrived there, he got into trouble, and the people at the store called the police. And when the police interviewed him, they learned that this boy had taught himself how to drive on YouTube at 8 years old. An 8-year-old teaching himself how to drive on YouTube, 10 years from that point, is going to be confronted with the idea of college and university and learning. And he's grown up teaching himself anything that he needs to know on YouTube. And this is the expectation, not only from young people today, but all of us, that we should be able to learn anything faster. We should be able to get access to any type of information at the touch of a button. Here's an amazing app called Radio Garden that I love, where you can download the app onto your phone and you can move your finger across and listen to a radio station from anywhere in the world. So now the world's news, the world's media is literally at our fingertips, because we can use an app like this to experience it. Tasty cooking videos are watched worldwide to help people answer what is, for many of us, the biggest question we face every day: what's for dinner? And we can use these tasty cooking videos to figure out what we should be making for dinner. And they're just easy time-lapse videos, kind of like what I showed you before, but for food. And we can experience them and use them. And to some degree, this trend influenced and inspired a new guidebook series that my team and I launched around the Non-Obvious brand, which is called the Non-Obvious Guide Series. And these are just a few of the guides that you can actually get in the market right now. And the idea behind them was to essentially do what this stealable idea suggests you can do, which is to connect people with knowledge, to inspire their beliefs, to better connect with them, and to be able to provide something that is highly valuable and highly useful for them. And that's really, really important. The next trend I want to share with you is something I call revivalism. And revivalism is based on this overwhelming sense that we have so much technology and things have moved so fast forwards that sometimes we just want to turn the clock backwards. We just want to hit the pause button for a little bit and get away from some of the technology, which is sometimes called the techlash. It's this backwards looking need to kind of take it back to a simpler time. So we're listening to music on vinyl again, or Kodak is making film again, or all of these shows that we might remember, especially if you're here in the US, these sort of iconic entertainment productions like Star Trek and Sir Patrick Stewart taking on that role of being Captain Picard again, or bringing the cast of the famous movie Back to the Future together to read the script and post that on YouTube. I mean, launching puzzles again. This was a really evil campaign by Heinz Ketchup to launch a puzzle where all the pieces were the same color. So I definitely don't recommend this. This is very, very difficult and not good for anybody. But classical games coming back, so old board games or old video games. I mean, all of these are examples of moments where we are trying to rediscover the analog, go backwards in time to create an experience that is valuable for people. The next and final trend that I wanted to share with you is something that I call flux commerce. And flux commerce is based on the fact that these lines that used to exist between industries are starting to break down. And more what we're finding is that Apple, a technology company, created a credit card and moved into financial services. Or banks have created coffee shops. Or crayon that is known for making their coloring crayons and markers has moved into makeup, because makeup is basically painting your face. So it makes sense, right? It's a brand extension. Recyclable shoe that is being sold on a subscription model. So business models are shifting. This particular shoe was just launched, and for $30 a month, you subscribe to the shoe, you wear it for as long as it lasts, and then you return it and you get a new one, and they take the entire shoe and they recycle it. So it's a big circle in terms of being able to recycle it, and now you no longer own the shoe anymore. Or Taco Bell creating a hotel. I mean, all of these are examples of disruption and disrupting business, how we work, disrupting the nature of how all of these things are done. So what I want to leave you with is a final quick recap of some of the things that we talked about. So we talked about the 5 habits of trend curators: being observant, be curious, be thoughtful, be elegant, and be fickle. We also focused on how all of these pieces come together to talk about some trends. And I shared several trends that are part of my process for being a non-obvious thinker. And we talked about 4 specifically. So as I mentioned before, there's a very easy way for you to get access to not only my slides, but also all of these insights and a free excerpt of the book as well. So this is the URL that you can use to get access to a long excerpt from Megatrends, including many of the trends that I talked about today, all of the slides that I shared today, and several other things. So please do go there, check out all of those materials, and please connect with me. I always love to connect with you on LinkedIn or anywhere else. I do a live show every Thursday, which would be evening for most of you if you're in Poland. So Thursday evenings, I do a live show where I interview fascinating, non-obvious people. So please do tune into that as well. Thank you for being part of my talk. Thank you for listening to me. And finally, I will leave you with one last image from that same photo shoot, the URL that I mentioned before, and my personal email address so you can get in touch with me directly.
Hi. Oh, thank you so much, Rohit, for this very inspiring speech. And finally, we know how to really think about trends and how to find them. So thank you. On one hand, thank you for your non-obvious trends. As usual, I love them. But also for the tools, which is amazing, because I think living in such a non-obvious future, such a non-obvious, non-unprecedented future, we need some tools to really think about the possible scenarios and maybe experiment in them. I mean, as companies. So thank you for that.
Yes, you're welcome.
I have a question about one of your, I think, the strongest topic. You are really a great expert at the future of work, the virtual offices, virtual work. Do you think after pandemic, do you think we stay in some kind of hybrid type of working? Or you think we would love to come back to the normal offices, same as conferences. So what do you think? How it will look like within the next, 2-3 years?
I think the first thing I think that will happen is as soon as the offices open back up and people can go back to the office, there'll be probably 2 or 3 weeks where everyone is just so happy to be back at the office, and they'll go every day. And after those 2 or 3 weeks, I think people will realize that, I don't think I need to go to the office 5 days a week to do my job. And in fact, it's kind of nice to not have to dress up and to not have to get in the car or go on the train or however you get to work and waste all of that time, because now I've become used to having that time back in my day and back in my life. Mm-hmm. And so I do think that there's going to be a hybrid future after we get past that honeymoon phase, I think, of, yes, we can go back to the office. We're so excited. I think there'll be a few weeks of that, and then we'll start to see correction.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rohit. I have maybe not a direct question, more like asking for your comment, because your non-obvious philosophy, let's say, is very interesting. And, we saw earlier there was a kind of what's next in terms of social media, that people will be rated about how popular they are and everything. And we already have that by default with Facebook likings and LinkedIn likings, and if you don't get enough, makes you even a very self-confident person can be a little bit down if they don't get the reaction. And I'm thinking about the next generation who's only lived in this world, and whether some non-obvious thinking could maybe help them to see that the world is not defined by how many likes you get and your self-worth, etc. So, more like your comment on this situation, if we could.
Yeah, I think that there's a generation right now, which is actually not children. It's not kids that I worry most about. It's actually the 20-somethings right now. And the reason why I say that is because the kids today, like my kids, as they're growing up, they're learning about how to integrate these tools into their lives. I mean, my 12-year-old has an app that he's installed on his own phone to prevent him from spending too much time on certain apps. So like kids are learning how to create that balance. They're learning about cyberbullying. They're learning about like just, what you say online stays online, so you can't take it back. So be kind to people. I mean, we have education now in many places about that. But whereas the 20-somethings who grew up with social media but had none of that training, they're who I'm much more concerned about, because, they never had the benefit of learning that balance. They grew up at a time where it was just, here's your phone and off you go. And so that's, I think, the generation that has really struggled to find the balance much more, because they never really had any education or help to find it earlier.
I mean, for that 20-something generation, do you think in the sort of non-obvious way of thinking that could be helpful for them?
Yeah, I think that this perspective of at the base of the idea of non-obvious thinking, there's a couple of fundamental beliefs. And one of the beliefs, I think, is just because someone doesn't think like me doesn't make them stupid. It doesn't make them wrong. They can disagree with me, and that's okay, because not everyone has to agree with me. And I think that this perspective is one that really can help anyone find that balance between those things. Because the thing is, like, what makes us feel bad on social media when someone doesn't respond to us, or when they maybe respond negatively, maybe we get a negative comment. These are the sorts of things that make us feel bad. Whereas the perspective that I think many people get over time as they build confidence is, some people don't like me. That's like, you can't please everyone.
You're right, and there is something important you said, because we grew up, most of us grew up trying to be surrounded by people who agree with us, and in today's world is completely wrong behavior, because we have to be surrounded by people. We have to surround ourselves with people who disagree with us, because this is the only way to think in an innovative way, to come up with something new, by arguing, by asking right questions, but disagreeing.
Yeah, I think, look, it's not fun to be around people who disagree with you, because they're annoying, right? I mean, they have a perspective that you don't agree with, and that's not a fun thing to do. And so, I'm not suggesting that you make friends with people who you hate and just hang out with them all the time, virtually or in real life, when that happens again, right? What I'm saying is, find perspectives that are outside of your own and read them, watch them. They don't have to be your best friends, right? That's not what I'm saying. But you have to appreciate that people think differently in different parts of the world, because they grow up differently. They have different experiences.
No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. We have a tricky question from our audience. Instant knowledge Are we ready for that, Rohit?
That is a tricky question. In many ways, I think that we are ready for it and we want it, but we will suffer as a culture because of it. And I think you're already seeing signs of that. That people say, "Well, I know just enough, but I don't actually know more, and I don't care to know more." Right? The TLDR acronym, which I don't know if you have a Polish version of it, but the whole too long didn't read mentality is based on that, right? It's like, look, I just want the quick version of this.
Yeah.
Don't make me read anything. Don't make me study anything. Don't make me actually think. Because I'm too old for that, or I don't have time for that, or whatever your excuse is. And I think that we do suffer from that because we don't become wise as people.
You're right. And I think this is like perfect ending of our today's conversation. Yeah. Thank you so much, Rohit, for being with us. It was really something very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rohit.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Very welcome. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. All the best. Yes.